Hi guys, welcome back to the Flicks Files. I thought it was time I did another what I call guilty pleasure video where I talk about a movie that I like but doesn't get as much love. And this is definitely one of those movies. I first saw this back in the early 80s when it was broadcast on television. And it kind of stuck in my mind for the longest time. And I never thought of buying it on DVD or even looked to see if it was on DVD. It kind of just disappeared in my memory for a while. And then I noticed that Arrow Video did a special edition Blu-ray of it a few years ago. And as soon as I saw that, all these memories came flooding back. And I thought, oh yes, I remember that movie about a black car. It was kind of a precursor to the John Carpenter movie Christine. And I thought, oh yeah, I remember that being really good. So I bought the Arrow Blu-ray, and it is a damn good Blu-ray. The picture quality is really, really nice, and it comes with some really decent extras. And it was while I was going through my library and I saw the disc on my shelf behind me, I thought, yes, I'm going to do a guilty pleasure video about that. I think that film deserves some more love. So the film is The Car, and it was made in 1977. And the movie opens where we see the car driving down a desert road, which I think is in like the Californian desert. And the look of the car is very distinct. I think it's a Lincoln Continental Mark III in black. And it has like tinted orange windows. And it just looks evil. I don't know whether that's how Lincoln Continental Mark III cars looked out of the showroom or whether the filmmakers altered it in some way. But suffice to say, when you see it, it just looks like a very mean car. It looks like what I'd call a Men in Black car. You know, you can imagine that's the sort of car that Men in Black drive if they do exist. And yeah, so it's driving through the desert and it comes across two cyclists, which end up being its very first victims of the movie. Suffice to say, as the movie plays out, the car knocks off quite a lot of people. It's surprising. And it kills these two cyclists, ramming them against like a canyon wall. And then I think another one, it runs into them and it flips them over a bridge. So they die from the fall. And before the car gets to its next victim, we're introduced to James Brolin's character. And James Brolin plays like a deputy sheriff, and he's in a relationship with this young teacher who comes into the plot a little bit later on. And James Brolin's a terrific protagonist. I've always kind of liked him as an actor. I always thought he was really good in Michael Crichton's Westworld, which is a movie that I'm going to be covering in a video all of its own at some point in the future, because I just love that movie. So it's great to see him in a leading role in this, because I think he had that kind of leading man sort of Burt Reynolds charm that was all the rage in the late 70s and early 80s. Yeah, so we then cut to a young guy who sat by the roadside and he's playing a French horn, I think it is, while he's waiting for a car to come along because he's hitchhiking. And he sat outside of a house where a couple are arguing. And the husband of this couple is an American actor called R.G. Armstrong. Now, you may not know his name, but you'll probably know his face when you see his face. He seemed to have etched out a living playing mean, gruff characters, based on the way he looked. And in this, he's being quite abusive towards his wife. So the minute we first encounter him in the movie, he's not a very likable character. And we also see by the van that's parked outside his house that he's kind of an explosives expert to do with mining, I'm guessing, or quarrying. And he comes out and berates this young hitchhiker for playing this French horn. And they have a bit of an altercation. And then R.G. Armstrong, whose character is called Amos, by the way, he goes back into his house. And it's there we see the car appear in the distance. So this young hitchhiker kind of gets himself ready and sticks his thumb out. And, you think, well, I know where this is going. And sure enough, the car runs him down and kills him. So he's like victim number 3. And it's at this point that James Brolin and his fellow officers get involved as they start finding the bodies of the two cyclists that were killed earlier in the movie. So to begin with, they assume it's just a serial killer, and they don't know what they're dealing with at this point. And it's there that we get our first hint that the car is a supernatural force, and it isn't just some madman behind the steering wheel. Because we're shown James Brolin's girlfriend, and she's with a load of children doing kind of a parade practice, like a marching band parade. And they're practicing. And a few of the locals have come round to watch. And it's there that the car turns up. And I should note that the car has a very distinctive sounding horn, which I won't impersonate, but I'll put clips of it in here so you can get an idea of what it sounds like. So the car turns up and terrorizes the people, and they kind of scatter. And some of them run into a nearby graveyard, which is surrounded by kind of a stone wall with just one entrance to this graveyard. And they take refuge in this graveyard, and the car drives around this graveyard and then drives up to the entrance, but it stops just before it gets to the entrance to this graveyard. And, it's obvious that the car is an evil force, and it won't enter into, the holy ground of the graveyard. So, that's where the movie gives us the definite idea that this is an evil presence. And we never see the driver of the car. As I say, you never see anything through the windows because they're darkly tinted. And there are quite a few shots where the camera's inside the car looking out through the front windscreen with this horrible orangey, like nicotine stained tinge to it. So it's at that point that the police turn up and they try and corral this car down. And two police cars end up racing the car head on. And they drive towards it thinking, oh, well, we'll make it swerve off the road. But what happens is it's quite a terrific stunt where the car does like a handbrake turn, and it ends up rolling along on its side and flips over the top of these two police cars, and just they both explode, killing all the officers inside. And you watch it and think, oh my God, it's already like doubled its body count. And then James Brolin catches up with it on his motorbike, because James he's like a chips guy, he's a patrol officer on a motorbike. And the car stops in the road, and he gets off his bike, and he's very gingerly walking up to the car with his gun drawn. And I think he's just about to reach for the door handle, and the door like latches open just a little bit. You think the door's going to swing up, it just opens just a little bit. So you think, oh, we're going to see the driver of the car, which at this point we're thinking, is it the devil? Is this the car that the devil drives when he's manifested on earth, as bizarre as it sounds? And he's just reaching for the door handle, and then there's like a jump scare where the door swings open really quickly and knocks him to the ground and knocks him unconscious. And then the car door slams shut and the car drives off. So that kind of hospitalizes him for a short while. Presumably he's been winded or something. And his girlfriend goes to visit him in hospital. And also one of the other officers is played by a young Ronnie Cox, who you will recognize as being from the Beverly Hills films like Beverly Hills Cop and RoboCop and Total Recall. He's a great character actor. And he turns up to the bedside of James Brolin and tells him about the other officers that have been killed. So at this point, things are getting quite serious. And then the main sheriff of the town is an older actor. And as I'm recording this, I can't think of the guy's name, but he plays the movie producer Waltz in the first Godfather. So you may recognize him from that. Can't think of the actor's name off the top of my head. But he ends up getting skittled by the car as he's crossing a road. So, things are getting really desperate, and that kind of puts James Brolin in charge. And so his girlfriend heads back home, and she sees that the car has turned up outside her house. So, she's terrified by this and runs into the house to call the police. And there plays out a little sequence that's even now quite shocking, because you don't expect her, spoilers, by the way, you don't expect her to bite the bullet, as it were. But she gets killed, and the car just drives straight at the house and just drives completely through the house. Obviously one of these American houses all constructed using wood, and the car just blasts its way straight through the middle of the house with her in the way. So, it's very sad that his girlfriend gets killed, but that drives him and the other officers towards the end of the picture, where they try and trap and bring down the car. And this will lead to one of my favorite scenes in the movie. So they have Amos, explosives expert, R.G. Armstrong. They have him at the police station. And James Brolin comes up with a plan, which involves getting the car into a nearby canyon. And then while it's in the canyon, they'll use explosives to kind of trap it, to cause like a landslide. So they get Amos to agree to this and to supply the explosives that they'll need. And the best scene in the movie for me is where James Brolin goes back to his house to get his motorbike out of the garage, because he says that he'll act as like the bait to draw the car out, and then he'll drive up into the canyon with hopefully the car following him. And then the other officers will set explosives up, and they'll trap it. And there's a scene where he goes into the garage to get some parts, I think. He's after something. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what it is. And he kind of walks into the garage and comes outside. And then he goes back in. And suddenly you realize that the car is there in the garage. And he's like walked past it, and he's not even noticed it's there. When he suddenly senses something's there, and he turns around with this look of shock on his face. And it's there, right there in his garage. And it's a great sequence. It's a really good kind of, moment where you think, oh my God, it's right there. So he quickly makes a beeline for his bike, and sure enough, the car smashes out of the garage and follows him. And then we get to like the final scene of the movie, where he drives up into this canyon, and he manages to draw the car to like a big high point. And it's a very similar, as I'm talking about it, I've suddenly realized it's very similar to the ending of Steven Spielberg's Duel, which is another movie I'm going to be talking about in a future video, because I just adore that movie so much. And he kind of drives up to a cliff edge, and at the last minute he gets out of the way, and the car plows over the edge down into this canyon. And they manage to trigger the explosives just as the car's falling. And we're treated to the final scene in the movie, where all these explosives and fireworks are going off. And we hear like this horrible roar of the evil presence, that was inside the car, being burned or, destroyed by all of this fire that like rises up into the sky. And and the final scene is of the officers just standing there in the desert, watching the sun come up. And that's kind of it. I've made it sound like a very simple movie. And I suppose it is a very simple movie because ultimately it's just about an evil car that's killing people. But it's a really well shot movie. And as I say, it has quite a few sequences in it that for its time in the mid to late 70s were quite shocking. And, it has a really good sense of suspense throughout. And it's made all the more better by the fact that the actual car is such an evil looking thing, And I'd love to know if it's still around, if the actual vehicle has been kept and restored by somebody. I'll have to look on the internet. But yeah, so if you haven't seen the car and you're a fan of other films of this type, as I say, like Christine or Maximum Overdrive, then definitely give this a go. And if you do find it, pick up the Arrow Blu-ray because it's definitely worth your time, as is the case with Arrow. They're very good with their extras and things like that with lesser known movies. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you on the next one.